So let's talk about how we can use CSS to create layouts. And when I say layout, take a look again at this Facebook homepage. I'm talking about the placement of things on a page, okay? By default, HTML kind of lines everything up on the left and drops it down vertically on the page as we keep adding more elements. But if you look here, right, we can have a logo on the upper left and a sign up form on the kind of right here, middle right, a footer down here, and everything's kind of leaning left here. So that's what I mean by layout, and that's critical to making beautiful web pages. So one of the ways we can control the positioning or layout of some of these elements is using a property called float. So let's take a look at that first. So I've cleared out all of my CSS, and go ahead and pause the screen if you need to. But what we want to do is just build out something like this. And what I'm doing here, I'm just going to kind of space it out for you. We have this parent div, right? So this is the opening tag on line 9 and the closing tag here on line 20. And then inside of it, I'm going to get rid of this last one here for a second. We'll add that later. Inside of it, we have two divs, okay? We have two child divs inside of this parent div. We've got this one right here. There's the opening and there's the closing. And inside of that, it's got a child of a paragraph tag, right? And then we have this second child div from this parent. And it's right here, right? So we have that opening and closing tag. So let's look at that. If I refresh the page, it looks pretty much the same. Okay, so nothing's changed here. Now let's take a look at what floating does. We can have this div show up on the right. So kind of like what we were looking at with the Facebook page, if we want something to float over to the right and something else to stay on the left, we can use this float property. Let's try it out. So let's target this right div here, okay, just this one. And I gave it a class name to make it easy to kind of isolate it and target just that div in our CSS. So it's called div-right. You can make up whatever name you want, just stay consistent. So I'm going to target it. Remember, we use the dot notation to target classes. Div-right is the name we gave it. And then I'm going to say float, and I want to float it to the right of the screen. So if I save that, there you go. It's now moved over to the right. Okay, but now the positioning is still a little bit wonky. And something we can do to help us kind of visualize this too, this is just a little trick that I use sometimes is, you'll see developers do this quite a bit. You just say, let's grab all the divs. So now we're selecting all the divs in our CSS just by simply putting the div text there, right? Because that's the name of the tag. And then I'm going to say border 1 pixel solid red. And remember, CSS is kind of like adding paint to the walls and adding those stylistic touches to a house when you're building a house, right? Think of this little technique that I'm doing here as a way to add maybe some measurements and rulers as we're painting, so we know exactly what we're painting. So if I refresh it, you'll see the effect, right? Now every div has a red box around it. That's just going to help me visualize it. So notice what happened. It went from being a block level element, right? Block level elements mean elements that consume the full available width of its parent. So this div is still a block level element. Float takes away that feature, okay? So float has moved it over to the right. Now it's just the width of the actual element itself. Now, watch what happens when we float this one over to the left. Same thing's going to happen, right? If we want this one to stay on the far left and this one to stay to the right, we can do that. Let's grab this div left here, and let's add a class for it. We'll just put it right here. Div left. Let's add some properties. We'll say float left. If I save that, now it's floating to the left, and this one's floating to the right. But if you can see closely here, what's happened is that this box, okay, it's a little bit thicker. Why is that red line thicker up there? And it's because the container div, this parent div, collapsed. Okay, that's what we call a div collapsing, okay? It's collapsed and it's just kind of zeroed out at the top up here. And so let me zoom back out so you see what happens. When you float things, this is a really important part of floating, is you'll see that the elements around it, like this image that's kind of just hanging out here, they'll slide into wherever they can, as close up to the top of the page, right? So they'll just slide in wherever there's room. when you use floating. So you need to be careful. To prevent that, there's a trick we can use here, and it's called this clear fix trick. All we have to do is just add another div inside this parent div, add a child there, and let's give it a name so we can target it. We'll say bottom div, or we'll just call it bottom for now. Or how about bottom box? I like to use the term box just to, divs are essentially just boxes. So we have this bottom dash box here. That's the class name. Let's go down here and let's target it now. So now any rules we write in here are going to affect that particular one. And we add this clear both. Okay, this is another special property. When you're using floats, you kind of just want to use this clear property. And what that's going to do is that's going to say, okay, there's a div down here, and we want to clear anything from the left and the right of it. Okay, nothing else can sit on the left or right of it. And now when I refresh, bam, there you go. You can see there's a thicker red line at the bottom here. That's this div, right? There's nothing inside of it, so it kind of collapses itself. And it's saying, look, I don't want anything to the left or the right of me. And so this image is not allowed to jump up and slide in there and hang out at the top. So that's a little bit about floating. You'll have to kind of play around with it to get a feel of how floating works. Another thing you'll see is, okay, so let's grab this nested, this one right here, right? So this div, we called it div right. That's the class name it has. What if we wanted to float it to the left as well? We could do that. And there you go. Now you're starting to see how you can kind of line things up to the left, and just have things line up horizontally. And then, of course, if we wanted to kind of make this look a little more reasonable, we could space things out and say, okay, all of these divs, let's give them all, maybe a margin of 10 pixels. And that's going to just give us a little more spacing, right, for each div. Now you can kind of see things clear. There's the parent div, the main rectangle. Then we have this div left. This one we named it div-right. Then here's bottom box, which is kind of just flattened out because there's no content in there. And if we wanted to see it with some content, we could just say, okay, add some content inside. And there you go. And now you're starting to see, right, with these red lines, we're able to visualize a layout. It's starting to look more like an actual web page with a layout, right? Because it's the same thing's going on here. And I could even go in here and inspect element and then just go, and say, okay, all these divs, let's add, a rule to them. We'll add, I don't know if we can grab all of them, but yeah, like this, and say, okay, border 1 pixel solid red. You could start to apply some borders like this on, and it's kind of hard to see, but we've added one here. We could add it here just to start visualizing, how these layouts look, right? We can just start adding borders, and there you go. We're adding these red borders to see how things are laid out, and we're doing the same thing here. Simply with floating, we're able to create, a layout that's a little bit more like a standard web page that we've seen. So that's floating. Now we're going to take a look at another form of layouts, which is another way to kind of control layouts, which is positioning.